Rachel, I think you're the host.
We are now recording.
Great. Good morning, everyone. This is the Willamette Week endorsement interview for Metro Council District 3. Our candidates who have made the fall runoff are Tom Anderson and Garrett Rosenthal. Tom, why don't you get us started with a brief 2 or 3 minute introduction why you're running for this office and what you think you can bring to the Metro Council. And then we'll do the same for Garrett.
Sure. Listen, I'm on the Tigard City Council right now. Before that, I was on the Tigard Planning Commission. During that time, we accomplished quite a bit. It's just not an empty resume filler. It's something that I was very passionate about. When I was on the Planning Commission, we started the different housing types, the ADUs and the cottage clusters and the duplex and fourplex design work. So when House Bill 2001 came up in Salem for the missing middle housing, our state rep, Margaret Doherty's, told Tina Kotek, said, call Tom Anderson. He knows about this missing middle housing. So I've been involved in all, I can go on about that experience, but Tigard is situated right in the middle of this district. We have regional problems that the city can't solve, that Metro is uniquely positioned to help cities of our size. So that's why I'm running, and that's what I can bring to the table.
Great, thank you. Garrett, can you give us the same introduction, who you are, why you're running?
Sure. I'm Garrett Rosenthal. I'm a 28-year resident of the Tualatin area. I've lived here and then been in the area for a long time. I'm running because I care about regional government. I've worked for a regional agency in Eugene, and so I got to appreciate the special roles that regional governments have. It's not an elected body, but it deals with a wide range of things. I managed the regional water resources program for that agency and realized that coordination and cooperation is sort of the key of what Metro does. I've also worked on a lot of the kinds of things Metro does in my professional capacity: land use, transportation, solid waste, and open space protection. So I'm very concerned with those. I'm also, because I'm a generalist and an activist in a lot of ways, I'm also interested in the housing and homeless issues, and I have friends who have been very active in housing and homeless issues throughout the Northwest, former director of the Portland Housing Bureau, and a person who's worked with in the private sector. So this is the kind of thing that I'm very concerned about as well. So I'm running because I care. I want to see all the cities of our Southwest region, which from a transportation standpoint gets a little bit of the short end of the stick, and also needs a little bit more attention because we're a major labor center. So I want to represent all the areas, the Wilsonvilles, the Sherwoods, the Tualatins, the King Cities, which is changing, as well as Tigard and Southern Beaverton.
Great, thank you. The fact that the two of you live respectively in Tigard and Tualatin makes this race, which otherwise might be a little quiet, a little bit more interesting, given that the biggest money ask on the ballot is a $4 billion transportation tax, of which the tent pole is a light rail line to Tigard. So Bridgeport Village, to be precise. I guess I'm interested in hearing from each of you, and Garrett, we'll let you go first, given that you went second last time. I'm interested in hearing from each of you, where do you stand on this measure? I want a yes, no on that, and then also some explanation of your thinking.
All right, yes, I stand yes on it. And when it says Bridgeport Village, which is Tigard, it actually is very close to Tualatin. If I've been, I live outside of Tualatin, so I don't actually live inside the city limits. I live in rural Washington County. So I also represent the rural interest. I would have wanted to see it extend all the way to the industrial area so it could provide people to get to their work environments, which is a fairly big area between Wilsonville, Sherwood, and Tualatin. It is, it's Tigard, but Bridgeport Village is also sort of considered North Tualatin, and it's actually right next to Durham. So, and it's also close to Lake Oswego, so it provides access to the whole southern region to some extent. I support it because I think light rail has shown to be an effective means to avoid more freeway lanes and help people to get downtown once we get away from COVID. Hopefully they'll be able to go downtown and enjoy a lot of the things that are there, such as the performing arts centers that Metro manages. And I think it'll help and avoid a lot of transportation. It's more efficient than cars.
Great. Tom?
Yes, so I support that. The transportation, you know, the light rail is the biggest piece of that transportation bond. I kind of wish they would have done it separately. They packed on quite a bit and made it so large that the funding mechanism is a little clunky. And I wish that they could revise that a little bit. Problem with government, it takes so long, it's hard to back up. So I support it. I wish they would put a sunset on it, right? So it never ends. This 30-year bond will pay for everything, but then it keeps going. They don't have to vote for it again. So I wish they would put a sunset and end it. But other than that, of course, it'll bring jobs. It'll bring another transportation option for Tigard Tualatin. You know, the reason they didn't keep going forward, I mean, Trimet would like to go forward, but it just costs too much money. At one point, we were thinking, geez, they're going to run out of money. They're going to have to stop in Tigard or maybe even stub at PCC. So it's all about money. It's a very expensive. There's a reason that this is the last leg of the transportation bonds, because it's very expensive to get from Pill Hill down to, you know, Barber Boulevard area. So it's kind of my long answer. So
Sure.
Yeah.
You know, both of you, well, I think Garrett mentioned in his answer on this bond, the pandemic. And I think it's worth asking, I mean, our reporting has shown that Metro's finances have been hammered by COVID-19. I can't remember the exact number of people laid off, but it's north of 100, certainly.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Metro employees, and that's probably a conservative figure. How does this agency begin to stabilize as the economy recovers, assuming suddenly that the economy recovers? Tom?
Well, they've got to just focus on their core issues, right? Parks maintenance. All the event centers are closed for good reason, right? For COVID. They will come back eventually. And a lot of those employees were permanent part-time employees. We may have lost those for good. I mean, we just don't know. So there's going to be some cutbacks. You know, $9 million revenue shortfall just a couple of weeks ago, I heard their accountant say. So there's going to be some belt tightening for the next 3-4 years, no question. So no new projects unless they can obviously pay for themselves. They may have to sell off some assets. It's going to be tight, no question.
Oh, did you say something?
Yeah, I just said it's your turn to answer that question.
Oh, well, you know, the performing centers were largely self-supporting, although they did take some money. Metro itself is primarily supported through various kinds of tax and tax revenues. So a large part of its operations are not grossly affected. The zoo and the performing arts centers the most. Hopefully there will be unemployment insurance for a lot of the people, and they'll bring a lot of the people back. But it does depend on what Portland does in terms of drawing Portland people back, drawing tourist people back into Portland. That's going to be a large impact. Regarding its other operations, it has bond issues, it has housing. The housing and those, probably the biggest thing that's going to help, it won't help Metro, but it'll help the region, will be the transportation bond or the transportation tax issue, which will help bring out a lot of jobs. So I think Metro will shrink, and I think Tom is correct. There will have to be some belt tightening in some of its new projects, but it has the money for continuing work on parks. It has the money for continuing work on housing and on homelessness, and it's almost completed with the zoo. They're going to have to work to get the zoo open. So I think the other governments are probably going to be more dramatically affected than Metro. Metro has 8 particular charges that are funded mostly through tax revenues. And that includes the database, that includes the pioneer cemeteries, That includes the solid waste. The solid waste, they adjust the tipping fees according to what they need to keep the process rolling.
Great. Does the pandemic offer opportunities for creative thinking about Metro, what Metro does and how it does it?
Well, of course, they've opened up the convention center to a drive-through COVID testing. I'm not I'm not an epidemiologist. It's been very difficult to go forward with the lack of direction, particularly from the federal level, and because of the changing nature of the COVID. First we're in it and first we're not, and we really have, we started to relax and then we're getting into another spike, and so it's been a cut down. Metro is not a health agency, so they're not the ones making those primary decisions. They have to be responsive. They have been adaptive. They moved to all their meetings on Zoom, and they furloughed a lot of employees. They've opened the Zoom and part-time. They're working more with people in parks and recreations and landfills to be safer. They're just trying to follow the guidance and keep their employees safe. And so far they've been pretty successful. So I'm not sure if that quite answers your question. They have to follow the lead of Multnomah County Health, Portland Health Department, and the State Health Division. They really are in a let's do the best we can to keep our employees and the people, but the businesses, the performing centers are closed down. So what else can you do?
Yeah. Tom, do you see opportunities for Metro to rethink what it does in some way, be creative?
Well, I think that transportation bond is a good measure, right? And instead of starting in 2021, they're starting in 2022. And I propose that they start at 0.6% instead of 0.75%, and then phase that in over 4 years. So every year it would go up a 0.05%. So there's financing ways you can do it. That wouldn't affect the bonding of the transportation issue. It would just take a little bit longer to pay off. So I think, I think they're going to be, creative with different parks maintenance. They're going to leave some natural areas natural a little bit longer before developing them. And everybody's going to get creative.
Okay.
Can I ask, can I step in there? Absolutely. Yeah. Garrett and Tom, could you help us distinguish? Whoa.
What happened?
No. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's fine on my end.
Garrett and Tom, I'm wondering if you could help distinguish yourself from your opponent. How are your views different about Metro? Are there areas of disagreement?
Who do you want to start on that? I'll start.
Great. Go ahead.
I think there's some differences on some of the basic issues in terms of like Tom suggested, the idea of 0.6 to 0.65. We don't disagree on some of those issues I don't think we disagree on the basic principle that Metro has all this money that they're going to have to manage effectively. I think the difference is I represent both the rural as well as a broader based set of interests and a broader based set of experiences and a broader professional base. Tom comes from a real estate background and from a fairly significant area, Tigard, but it's a specific urban representation. So I think the biggest difference is probably in philosophy of how we represent the.
I'm sorry for interrupting. I understand the difference in your background and I understand all that. What I'm looking for is how does that translate to views you take at Metro, and how's that going to differ from Tom? What's the difference we're going to get? We obviously have to make a choice between what are clearly two competent individuals who understand Metro.
Well, that's pretty hard to say. I mean, Tom and I haven't spent a lot of time talking to each other. We have both said our positions, which are not grossly dissimilar on the major issues, housing, homelessness, and the transportation bond issue. I would, so until you get to the specific decisions, I would have to ask, for example, one decision is going to come in the negotiations with ODOT as to whether some transportation corridors should be transferred to Metro or to the local cities. And that's going to be a city by city definition until you say how that's going to be. I would tend to try and say ODOT should relinquish a lot of the controls and should put it more in a regional control basis. I don't know exactly how, Tom, nobody's ever asked us that question before. On the question of whether Metro should have more solid waste facilities, it should encourage more private or more public solid waste facilities. I think Metro can do more. I think they should have more transfer and recycling stations in all of the jurisdictions rather than in jurisdictions that are sometimes very hard to get to for people. I think they should have more when it comes to a decision of how much pressure they should put on Trimet for electrification of its buses. I might be pushing a little harder than Tom, but I haven't heard nobody's asked us that specific question. So,
well, Garrett, so here you go. Here's an opportunity for you to step out and be different from Tom. Metro, as you know, has the legislative authority to take over Trimet.
Yeah.
Do you support that?
That we were asked that question by the Oregonian, and we both had a somewhat similar answer. I would support looking at it. There's a lot of reasons pro and con. Metro doesn't have the staff at this point in time to take over Trimet from a technical standpoint, and there are a lot of there's a lot of people that you have to look at. I think we both said that. I think that they at least should have a lot more interplay. They should at least have, to start out with, as a joint advisory board that makes sure that their policies are compatible. I have not seen the financial studies, the practical studies, the engineering studies, what it would take in terms of transferring all the staff to see whether this would be done. I am open to that. I am open to that concept because the problems between Metro and Trimet, because people don't understand that Metro can suggest what Trimet should do, but they can't tell Trimet what to do because it's independent. I do think Trimet should have more, shall we say, elected representation on its board. And
Tom, can you share with us any areas where you think you differ from Garrett?
Yeah, first of all, no, I don't think Metro should take over Trimet. Trimet's got a really bad financial problem with their retirement plan that Metro does not need to get involved with. I think I'm going to push back more on Metro because District 3 just doesn't really align with Multnomah County. I do have the city experience, and the cities around Washington County don't have a very favorable view of Metro. They say, don't drink the Kool-Aid, right? Don't approve everything Lynn says. It's not what the District 3 wants. And I tend to agree with that. And I would fight a little bit more, probably a few more no votes than Garrett on some of these issues.
Well, I'm interested in that. I'd like to know what issues were you. Let's just talk about where you see yourself being a no vote against Lynn Peterson.
What can I revise, narrow that question? What votes has Metro taken recently where you would have been a no vote against Lynn Peterson?
Yeah, and let me say, I know Lynn and I like her, and she's endorsed me. So I have a professional respect for her, but the Here Together plan, right? The supportive housing services bond, I thought was way too expensive, right? $250 million a year for 10 years, $2.5 billion in a area that Metro has never gotten into before, right? Supporting wraparound services. We don't even know what to call it because it's so new. And so we go from 0 to $250 million a year for 10 years, huge. Could we have started at 100 million? I never saw the data that 100 million wouldn't take care of the problem. Would 50 million take care of it? But no, we've got this huge deal, and I would have pushed back certainly on the time limit or the money.
That was like.
And of course, defining the program. That was like Lynn Peterson being pushed into something. I'm not sure that we can. Well, it was. No question it was. They tried to get the best deal they could. But she is the council president, and, they could have said no to that, and it could have been a referendum. the group could have put it on, you know, got it on the ballot another way, but Metro decided to go that way.
So are there other things that you would have voted no on besides that?
Well, I would have pushed for at least a sunset again on the transportation bill, on the financing. I think it surprised them that the government agencies were not included in that. And again, you can't go backwards. Just because it's coming through Tiger doesn't mean, you know, I'm going to approve everything. So we just voted, again, and this is a difference between Garrett and myself. Garrett's got some experience for sure, but it's not current, right? And my experience, I mean, 2 weeks ago, I voted on the Metro design plan for the light rail project, 30% design concept plan. And so I'm involved in this every day. You know, I'm talking with Trimet and I'm talking with other regional leaders. do you think, I mean, whoa, if a couple people could mute, I think that's maybe why we're getting feedback, but do you have a difference of opinion on how you would think, how you would analyze whether to expand the urban growth boundary? Is there a difference there between you two? Because that's sometimes how real estate interests interplay with Metro. You want me to start? Well, I don't know Garrett's things on that, but I think there's an area in North Hillsborough that needs to be moved from the rural reserves to the urban reserves. I think the state took that away prematurely about 7 years ago. That's causing, listen, if we don't expand the urban growth boundary correctly, and I'm telling, correct land use planning, other areas are going to grow. Like North Plains is growing exponentially faster than they have capacity for. Canby is growing fast. Newburgh is growing fast. When we have areas on the outside that we can manage and plan better, that is my cause. It's not exactly, we can't build enough houses even if we expand the urban growth boundary to satisfy the amount of housing that we need to come in from the forecast for the next 40 years. So we have to do infill. We do have to do high density, but we do need to expand the urban growth boundary smartly. There are some areas that they want to expand the urban growth boundary. The builders don't even want to build there. It's just like Damascus. It was just very rocky. You couldn't get utilities in. Builders don't want to go there. And now it's not even incorporated. So we have to look at it very holistically. Can the builders build there? What is the time frame? And does the city have a plan to get utilities and services to that area?
Garrett, do you want to take that? Is there a way that you think you differ from Tom on how you would analyze expanding the urban growth boundary? You're on mute because I asked you to mute before, I think, but.
Okay, is that better? Yeah. Having been involved in land use planning before, particularly in the Eugene Springfield area, and I know the kinds of pressures, I think the real difference is that I would not look on the expansion as being primarily driven by the need for single family homes. I think these provide a lot of regional transportation and infrastructure issues. There is a need for that in some areas. My approach would be primarily based upon data projections. Metro maintains the large database for the region. So it would be for each area as to sort of what is the growth curve. And of course, that's going to have to be reevaluated now that we have once we get past the pandemic, we're going to have to reevaluate. Metro's going to have to reevaluate those population projections. As for specific areas, whether it's North Hillsborough, I'm not going to comment on specific areas until I've studied it in detail. But I think the data, that is to say the analysis, is there a population growth need? Is there an infrastructure need? These are the criteria that have to be used in all these cases. And I am a strong proponent of the fact that we need to have more higher density housing near the areas of employment. And so I think that that's our first priority, and that single family detached homes out where we don't have transportation, which encourage automobile use, are a much lower priority that we have. We also have to look at the land availability in each sub-jurisdiction. And I've said this before, each small city has its own unique characteristics, its own demographics, its own character, and its own employment characteristics. And I've talked to Wilsonville, I've talked to Sherwood, and I know a bit about Tualatin, as well as King City. So each one has to be done differently. Where I will agree with Tom is that we can't do it all from a Portland-centric approach, because what's good for downtown Portland doesn't necessarily work in all the small cities. They have to be looked at differently. And since I've worked with a lot of small cities throughout the region in both Oregon and Washington, I think I understand that perspective pretty clearly.
Thank you. I think Aaron has one more question.
Yeah, I wanted to ask each of you, I think we asked you this in the spring, and I want to ask it again here in the fall, who your biggest contributor is and what you expect they're hoping for. Garrett?
You know, I haven't looked at it recently. I think my biggest contributor is probably AFSCME, which is the union representing the employees, and they're quite happy right now with the kind of coordinated relationship they seem to have with Metro. They've expressed particularly that when Metro does budget projections, they actually are shared with the union. So since I have organized an AFSCME unit in the past down in after the Lane Council of Governments, they're probably my biggest supporter, and I would just want to maintain a strong working relationship. My attitude is, you know, Metro works, is part of a community. They work together. They don't work for management. Management works for the union and the employees as well as for the people. And one other point I have to make, remember, Metro represents not only the people, it also represents the cities, and it also has to represent the people who work there.
Great. Tom?
Okay, so my biggest contributor money-wise is PMAR, which is the Portland Metropolitan Association of Realtors. And I'm a member, right? So it's, they're giddy. They would just love to have one of their members on a you know, board. They liked it on city council, but I just think that they, you know, I'm the only one, a realtor that is actually running for a major position. So they're just happy, and they have a pack and money, and they're giving it to me. They don't expect anything more. I've worked with the Home Builders Association, and the Home Builders Association and I have, you know, crossed paths a few times, right? In Tigard, I was, you know, as council, we did this, but I was pushing for a CET, a construction excise tax for affordable housing, and we passed that, and Metro certainly strongly opposed that. And so we had to work out a compromise where we would, on their system development charges, when they would actually pay them. So I've negotiated with Metro, or I'm sorry, with the Home Builders Association, PMAR. They know I'm for affordable housing, for market rate housing. We need executive housing as well. It's just got to be a healthy housing market. Housing is probably conservatively 15% of the economy. Some people say 20% with all the ancillary, you know, furniture and landscaping and all that stuff. So housing is a very important part of the economy. I'm glad I know it. I'm glad I understand it. And that's, you know, that's where I'm starting.
Okay. Mark, did you have any further questions? You're on mute. You have to unmute yourself if you have further questions.
I do not. Thank you.
Okay. In that case, we're going to move to the cycle's fun question, which is, and I'll start with Tom this time around. The fun question, or at least fun for us,
Sure.
is what's the most awkward moment you've had on a Zoom call?
I was caught texting on a Zoom call. Somebody else that was on the same Zoom call, and they started laughing, and we started kind of laughing together. So we got caught on that, but that kind of happened.
one of the other people in a meeting was also texting with you, and you both were caught texting each other?
Yeah, well, we started laughing, so it was kind of inappropriate. So we both figured that out and stopped it.
Great. Garrett?
Well, we were on a platform committee meeting and we got bombed. And since I was not the official host, it was somebody else, and they had left the meeting, we had to just sit there and sort of try and figure out how we could get rid of everybody. And so we basically had to discontinue the meeting and start over. And as the chair of that meeting, it was like a little embarrassing that I was not the host.
We have yet to get bombed so far in this election cycle, and I keep waiting for it to happen, but I think we may just not matter enough.
I think they've also fixed some of the problems that were early on with Zoom, where they, you have to admit people now.
Yeah, I think there's that, and also just like sort of an obscurity factor.
It's good to be under the radar.
Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate you both making time to talk to us together.
Thank you guys.
Thanks again for your patience on a difficult scheduling process.
Well, sure. Yeah, I know you got a lot of groups to go through.